today we're unpacking a really critical piece of work from Australia. It's the 2025 Closing the Gap Independent Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander-led review.
That's right. And this is significant because it's an Indigenous-led review looking squarely at a national agreement on closing the gap. That agreement from 2020 is all about tackling these deep inequalities faced by First Nations peoples.
And what really jumps out, you were saying, is this focus on lived experience.
Exactly. It brings this fundamental tension to the surface, the gap between how governments operate and First Nations worldviews. And the review argues this tension has really stalled progress, you know?
Right, this deeper tension. So the report says the actual agreement, the structure, it's mostly okay, but the doing part, the implementation, that's where it falls down because of this tension.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that show up in the first priority reform, the one about formal partnerships and shared decision-making?
Well, it really gets to the heart of it. Is the engagement real partnership, or is it more like tokenism? Yeah. People involved actually described feeling, quote, like a 5-year-old kid.
Wow.
Yeah, like they were just being told things, not genuinely having a say or co-designing solutions.
Yeah, that paints a pretty clear picture of frustration.
It does. But interestingly, the review contrasts this with the COVID-19 response. That showed really effectively that when governments actually step back a bit, trust Indigenous leadership and work with them, well, genuine partnership can happen, and quickly.
So it is possible. It's not just theory.
Demonstrably so. It suggests it might be more about willingness, perhaps, than capability.
Okay. So moving to priority reform 2, building the community-controlled sector. What's the story there? Sounds like another key area.
A very key area. The report highlights that these ACCOs, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community-controlled organizations, they carry a, quote, heavy cultural load. They're doing vital work, deeply connected to community, but they're often chronically under-resourced.
And dealing with bureaucracy, too, I imagine.
Massively. Swamped by reporting requirements, often designed by government for government, not really reflecting community needs. And then there's this really concerning issue of black cladding.
Black cladding?
Yeah, where non-Indigenous companies sort of use an Indigenous front, maybe partner superficially, to win contracts meant for genuine community organizations. It undermines the whole sector.
That's insidious. But despite all that, ACCOs are pushing forward.
Absolutely. They're showing real self-determination. The review mentions the Victorian Aboriginal Children's Care Agency and its NUGO program. It empowers ACCOs to take on parental responsibility in court matters for Aboriginal kids.
And that makes a difference.
A huge difference. Because it's culturally grounded, you see better outcomes, fewer kids being removed. It works.
So here we have effective, culturally right solutions being hampered by the system. That connects back to that deeper tension again, doesn't it?
It really does. Which leads nicely into Priority Reform 3, transforming government organizations. What's the big block there, according to the review?
What did they find?
A stark finding. Racism is not being addressed. And importantly, it's not just talking about individual attitudes. It's identified as a core foundational issue embedded in the structures, the policies, the way government itself works.
Systemic racism, then?
Precisely. The review says even if people have good intentions, if the system itself has these biases built in, progress will always be limited. And that's why there's this urgent call for a return to bipartisanship. Divisive politics just make tackling these deep-seated issues so much harder.
That's a really challenging message, confronting that systemic issue head-on. Okay, finally, Priority Reform 4, shared access to data and information. What's happening there?
Well, historically, data concerning First Nations people was often collected by government, for government, and it was frequently used, frankly, as a tool for harm, justifying policies, surveillance often framed through a deficit lens, focusing only on problems.
All right, just the negative statistics.
Exactly. So now there's a powerful push from communities for Indigenous data sovereignty.
Meaning?
Meaning First Nations people having control over their own data. How it's collected, who owns it, how it's interpreted, how it's used. It's about reclaiming that narrative. There's an example in the Kimberley, the KHEDP, a health data platform. It's community-led, ensuring the data serves local needs, helps them plan, and moves away from that old deficit story.
That feels like a really fundamental shift in power, or at least the potential for one.
It is. It's crucial.
So when you pull this all together, what does it really mean for you, listening? It seems the heart of closing the gap isn't just ticking boxes on targets. It's more profound. It's about rethinking the entire relationship.
That's exactly it. The review uses phrases like self-determination in action. It calls for governments to genuinely relinquish control. Not just consult, but actually share power to build what it calls a right relationship.
A right relationship based on mutual respect, recognition, shared authority.
Yes, it's a shift from a top-down approach to a genuine partnership footing.
So thinking about that, what really strikes you about what that right relationship could unlock for Australia's future? And maybe how can everyone listening play a part in actually building that?